Happy birthday, dear Nils. Happy birthday to you. Speech. Oh, and the reason I wanted us to actually do that, not only to wish Nils a happy birthday, who's just a beautiful man and a lovely human being, is to also say that we have literally just violated copyright law, because that song is not in the public domain. It is literally owned by corporations, and I encourage people to violate that law in every way, in any way we can, because as a lawyer, I don't believe in allowing a legal system that is corporatized and thoroughly taken over our culture and society. So that's the reason. Thanks for starting us off, and I insisted that we finish it up. And Nils, are you ready, Lindsay? Nils, get us started.
For my birthday party, we are having a wonderful workshop led by David Cobb. So welcome to Using Elections to Transition. David Cobb is a people's lawyer who has sued corporate polluters, lobbied elected officials, run for political office, and been arrested for nonviolent civil disobedience. He was co-founder of Move to Amend, served as the Green Party nominee for President of the United States of America in 2004, and initiated recounts in Ohio and New Mexico. In 2016, he was the campaign manager for Jill Stein and Ajahn Baraka.
Thank you, Nils. And thanks for that wonderful introduction, and happy birthday to Nils. You know, we only have an hour, so I'm going to try to just do a couple of little framing things and then get into a group conversation about it. Part of my framing is to say, I am a straight-up revolutionary, and I don't make any bones about that. I do that for two reasons. Number one, because it's true. I'm a revolutionary because I believe we have to restructure this society. This current society is fundamentally racist, it's fundamentally sexist, it's fundamentally class oppressive, and the huge transnational corporations are literally going to destroy the planet that we depend upon for life itself if we do not transition away from the current system. So that's one reason I proclaim to be a revolutionary. The second is to try to encourage others who may think like me to feel empowered and have permission to actually use that kind of language too. And a big nod and a thank to U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders, who made political revolution actually an acceptable term. And I want to be clear, I don't actually use it as merely advertising or sloganeering. Not saying Bernie did, but I'm saying I'm really trying to push us to recognize that the transition movement itself is by nature, by definition, actually a revolutionary process if we take ourselves seriously. Because at the end of the day, what I believe is this: all of the amazing things that I have heard this weekend and all the amazing things that transitioners are doing all across not only this country but the globe itself, all of these things that are bubbling up are at the moment niche opportunities. They are things that are happening in spite of existing political, economic, legal realities. They are like so many cracks in the sidewalk. And the institutions of law, and again, I'm a lawyer by training, the institutions of law, the economic institutions, the civil institutions, for the most part, are hindrances that we have to work around. What would it be like if government itself was actually facilitating transition? What if we actually had a recognition that the peaceful, just, democratic, and ecologically sustainable world that transition represents was actually the goal of governance itself, right? Yeah. I thought that'd get that out of you. And not to go too deep, but I'll just observe that the concept of peace, justice, democracy, and ecology happen to be the four pillars of the International Green Party movement. Just saying. So, what we're going to do is a quick, and for those of you who are like me, who like we only have a limited amount of time, what's the terrain? What are we going to cover? Here it is. Introductions, then a little bit of on elections as a front of struggle. We're going to do a quick kinetic exercise so people get to move around. We'll do a couple of concrete examples of local elections, and then I'll do a spectrum of allies and opponents and thinking about how we can actually use this not only in local elections, but in all of our kind of conversations. So the first thing that we'll do is a round of introductions. I'm going to challenge us all, your name, what city you're from, and in one short declarative sentence, to share with us why you chose to come to this workshop when there's so many other workshops you can do. And I'll also say, I'm going to just say, John, you're about halfway. No, actually, Steve, you're about halfway. So at Steve, I'm going to remind us, so I'm not picking on you, I'm saying it right up front, I'm going to remind us it's one short declarative sentence. And as a matter of full disclosure, part of the reason I do some of this stuff, I'll actually stop myself to point out, I'm hoping to give you some skills yourselves as organizers and facilitators about ways that you can actually sort of use little techniques that are helpful. So I'll model what I mean. So I'm David Cobb. I live in Humboldt County, California, and I would come to a workshop like this because I believe elections are the only way to do nonviolent revolution. And as a nonviolent revolutionary, I know elections have to be actually utilized. It's not the only place, but it is a place that we transitioners have to be.
My name is Nils Paulson from San Francisco. I am on staff at Transition US and a local resilience organizer, and I ran for Congress last year, and I'm considering doing it again because that sweet spot of transition and revolution is really where I see it being, where we need to go.
Scott Kramer, Minneapolis, live within 2 miles of where I was born. I run a business, a catalog, Northern Sun Merchandising, so I've been in the message business for 38 years.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, my name is Lee. I am currently in Minneapolis. I've been organizing Q&A forums for people who are running for city council and mayor in Minneapolis on local energy, wanting to go deeper into that.
My name's Forrest. I'm from Minneapolis, and I'm with a local group called Linden Hills Power and Light, which works on climate change issues. And I chose this workshop because I think that getting a more educated and engaged electorate is crucial to acting on climate change.
My name is Richard Dandridge. I'm from Port Townsend, Washington, and I chose this conference because we have city council and county commissioner coming up for election next year, and of course the 2018 National Congress
In Portland?
Port Townsend.
Port Townsend, Washington.
Okay.
I'm Kathy Judeman, and I'm from Helena, Montana, and I'm interested in ways to interface with the government officials in the capital city of Montana.
Steve Lelchuk, I'm from Minneapolis, and I work with a group called Vote Climate, so the connection is pretty obvious. We're interested in elections.
So I'm just going to remind folks to continue to do as every single person has done with short declarative sentences.
My name is John Fuller. I'm here from the Twin Cities. I came into this workshop thinking I'm mad as hell, but there's nothing I can do politically. And I want to leave thinking I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore.
Nicely done.
I'm Sheshadri Srinivas, and I am a clean water activist, and I have come here because some changes, the whole system is totally rigged against the people, but still there is some chances at the local level we can go and work around and get our things done.
My name is Nina Smoljar. I run and coordinate the New England Resilience and Transition Network. I have exposed many people to your bumper stickers for many years. Thank you so much. And I'm here because I think any and all of these efforts are, as they scale up, will come up to the barrier of policy, and the policy has to shift. So that's why I'm here, to learn more about that.
I'm Jim Connors. I live here in St. Paul, in the north end, north of downtown St. Paul. And I'm here because I think victory in some elections is going to help us to transition.
Eric Worthman from Brooklyn and Woodstock, New York. I'm here because Transition Town Woodstock had a debate about whether we should run somebody for the community board. I felt we should have. Other people felt we shouldn't have. We didn't. And I want to hear what you have to say about my election.
Wonderful. Come on in. You are literally right on time to just tell us your name, where you're from, and in one sentence why you came to this particular workshop.
Oh, okay. Juliet from Connecticut. Why I came? Well, it's just to see how you articulate transition with politics, because in Totnes they sort of independent. So I'm just curious if it should be part of the package or not.
Fantastic. So I literally, what I wonder, like, everybody's in the right spot. Is it Julie?
Juliet.
Juliet. Juliet, you really sort of set me up for the next one. I will describe elections as a front of struggle. Does anybody know that phrase, front of struggle, as a social change agent? Is that a phrase that you're familiar with?
No.
There.
Mostly from the old left, from the 30s, the Popular Front in France. I grew up with that.
Yeah, you're on the right track. So tell us in your assessment, sort of like what that means. As a popular
educator,
educator,
trying to bring groups together in actually in France in an election, a coalition of different left socialist groups to try to make social policy, and some of the hardcore Marxists said this was a mistake. We're giving in to the state, so forth and so on. That was a big argument.
So what I'm trying, and that's right, again, as I shared, I will occasionally stop and sort of point out a process. What I believe in is, as a popular educator, is whenever possible, you sort of just ask a question of what you want to talk about and elicit something from the crowd in order to really help model and demonstrate we all have tremendous wealth of knowledge here. I have a responsibility as the facilitator to move us through this, and so I've got a lot of power that you're granting to me and responsibility associated with it, but I really want to make it clear, like, I recognize that everybody here has a lot of knowledge and experience. Hey, come on in. And so the idea of being a front of struggle does come out of the old left as opposed to the new left jargon. That was, and I don't mean jargon in an insulting manner. I mean like a term of art. And what it means is, for example, how many people here are actively involved in the fight for climate justice? I thought a lot of hands would go up. So how many people here are actively involved in trying to dismantle the prison industrial complex? Thought some hands would go up. How many people here are actively involved in a living wage campaign in your local community? Other hands go up. I can't help, some people have raised their hands every time, which is, you know, revolutionary, whether you know it or not, whenever you can't help yourself from getting in and working on these issues. But in this jargon that Eric was just describing, each of those fights would be considered a front of struggle. They're all struggles, and the idea of a front of struggle is the thing that you are drawn to. That's actually the work that you ought to be doing, right? But what I and my colleagues have found is that so many people, because of the natural tendency to get involved in one of those fronts of struggle, what ends up happening, especially because of the legal system and the creation of nonprofits in order to be able to do work and the rest of civil society, silos get created. And those silos end up being that that's just what you focus on rather than the overall power structure. The United Front concept that came up in the 20s and the 30s was actually the concept to say we need to honor all of the fronts of struggle that include elections, but also any efforts that are actually trying to change society. So literally, I would argue that Food Not Bombs is a front of struggle, right? And I chose them very specifically because most Food Not Bombers come out of an anarchist tradition that just would never get involved in elections. And I honor that work. I don't tell them that they should not be doing that work. I honor that. I do think that, and this is part of what I'm getting to, and this is sort of, some of you had sort of asked about it in different ways, what I would say is, I encourage all of us, myself included, to stop thinking that you either do elections or you do social change work. That is a losing proposition. I think it's a false dichotomy, and clearly it is both and. Because I'll just be blunt. My read of U.S. history and at least Western history for the last 400 years has been, if you want significant social change, not just tinkering at the margins, but if you want change at the level at which transition is talking about, it's a simple recipe to describe. Super hard to do, but very simple to describe. You ready? It's 2 steps. Number 1, You need a social movement. A social movement that is broad, deep, conscious. And by conscious, I mean literally aware of all of the implications. And militant / disruptive. And I use militant and disruptive as a nonviolent practitioner to be very clear. We have to be willing to disrupt the current system. You cannot simply allow if we play only within the rules that we are given, we will always lose because the rules are stacked against us ever actually making that kind of change. So you need a mass movement, broad, across sectors, across races, across ethnicities, across spiritual and religious understandings, just like it has to be very broad. And it must be deep, which is to say it's got to actually be rooted in people's lived experiences. Amilcar Cabral, the great African revolutionary, famously said, never forget that people are not fighting for ideas and abstractions in their head. They're fighting for material benefits. They're fighting for peace. They're fighting to feed their children. People want to fight in order to actually win a new world, right? So it's really important to recognize that. So that's what I mean by deep. We've got to actually feel like we are invested in it. So broad, deep, and conscious is we cannot get away from conversations around the reality of patriarchy, capitalism, imperialism, and white supremacy. These are realities that we have to understand. Now, we don't have that deep conversation at pool halls and bowling alleys, but we have to also recognize, hey, that that's actually part of the reality. So broad, deep, conscious, and militant and disruptive, because you have to be willing to actually interrupt the system. And that brings me to the second topic, which is you must have an electoral arm that is advocating for that program or those policies at the ballot box. Because if you win at all levels of the social movement, and you completely change consciousness, if you completely change how people think, but you don't actually have people in elected office where the state operates, then you can't actually make legal changes. And a perfect example, I'm of a generation, I remember working on the anti-nuclear armaments effort, thanks in large part from folks at Northern Sun, I gotta say, right? Anybody else work on that? During the anti-nuclear war days? You better raise your hand. I know you did, Scott. Right? Yeah, marching. So did some different things. Like John was involved a little bit. Here's what I'll tell you. We won. Like if you actually look at the polling data, if you survey the American people, like we literally turned the tide on people's concept around nuclear war and nuclear weapons. It was like absolutely, positively, did we win the culture war. On the other hand, we totally lost. We are spending more money on nuclear weapons. It's just insane, right? And just piling upon piling. And this is the point I'm making. If you, like, it's not either or, it's got to be both and. I'm going to stop for a moment and ask clarifying questions. Anything that I've said so far, does anything not make sense that you need a little clarification or going deeper? Got you. So John, anybody else? And Steve? Richard. So John, then Richard.
Okay, number one was the social movement. Was number two the election?
Yes, that's right. And I had my, would you grab my bag and make sure that we get a dry erase marker out of it. So I was going to literally write that down and I forgot where it was. And I need to make sure I just get the right one so I don't get in trouble. Dry erase marker. Right? So let's do that, right? Because again, this is for visual learners, right? So a social movement, and the social movement must be broad,
conscious,
deep, conscious, and militant / disruptive. And then second is my assertion that there must be an electoral arm of that. And I would argue, for example, if you think about the abolition of slavery, women getting the right to vote, the creation of the Social Security Administration, unemployment insurance, workers' compensation laws, pure food and drug laws, ending child labor, the direct election of the United States Senate, the 40-hour work week. Every one of those things were not just tinkering at the margins. They were effort to change, and not even just laws, but legal doctrines, economic relationships they were trying to shift, right? They were big changes. And you know what? I got you, Lee. You know what's really important to note about that? Every single one of them used both social movement strategies and elections. And here's the other thing that I'll just name. Every one of those were championed by so-called third parties or alternative political parties, or outside of the dominant paradigm. Because, and I will say this, and yeah, I know you're on the stack, Lee, I will just assert that if we want literally systemic transformational change, we have to recognize it's not likely, it does sometimes, but it is only rare that such ideas are actually incubated within the existing two-party system, the existing establishment system. You see, the existing established parties exist to promote and protect the existing established order. Transition is revolutionary by definition. There's a reason that most people who are transitioners, if they engage in electoral politics, are either Greens or Independents or some combination thereof, or, and I don't mind saying it again in public, thank goodness for Bernie Sanders and opening up that space to actually have conversations. So Lee, you're right.
And so if you have like a, the social movement you described, wouldn't an electoral arm just come about naturally, or it's like if you had this anti-nuke movement, then why wasn't it matched in the electoral arm, or is it because there was some sort of counter-revolution?
I'm going to let Scott answer that one.
Yeah.
Because the issue we were confronting was a company and a government, and yet our elections were mostly at a local level or a state level, where that wasn't the issue at hand. So we weren't motivated to mount candidates specifically to that issue to win an election. You could then elect people who would say they're on your side, but then as your movement didn't stay constant, as they don't, they could do whatever they want. We even lost people like Paul Wellstone at times.
Right. And Lee, like, your question is a valid one. I am often reminded of the great, who's the pop artist? Andy Warhol. The great political philosopher Andy Warhol, who said, you know, people say that time changes everything, but it's not true. You actually have to change things yourself. Right? And again, one of the things that I think that some people who ascribe to Marxism as a historical analysis or a dialecticalism sort of lose the point. Like, we have agency. Like, it's not just like, oh, look, Marx says that this is how things are going to unfold, so let's just wait for it to unfold. Actually, human beings have to get involved, right? So things don't just spring up unless people act and spring up. And I think Scott is absolutely correct that the problem of the anti-nuke war movement was that we got into a silo around it, and we did use such incredible strategies to shift culture around it, but we did not actually integrate at the national level of movement that was going to actually hold people accountable, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what holding people accountable does. And so that's what I mean by elections as a front of struggle, a way to say we're going to engage them at that level. Yes?
I experienced the same thing as being a participant of Occupy Wall Street.
Yeah.
They didn't want to go to the electoral path
at all,
which I credit them for it, because I think most social movements die at the two-party system. But they also didn't want to create their own coalition of third parties or create a third party that themselves. So that's why, it's one of the reasons why I think it just fizzled out.
I think you're onto something there. And what's your first name?
Zevin.
Zevin. Oh, we've met.
Yes.
Yeah, online at least,
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, through the Occupy, and I think like I'm going to resist playing too much with this ball of yarn on his Occupy, but I will say this much. I think it's to Occupy's credit, on the one hand, of how they tried to maintain their independence, right? Because we look at the Tea Party and like how they sort of like erupted. And I will say this much. I think it's really important. Does anybody remember why the Tea Party erupted? Like, where did it come from?
Billionaires funding primarily, but it was the anger of right-wing white males.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Anger.
I would say that That's not where it came from. That's where it morphed. I would, go ahead, Steve.
My recollection is that they were really angry at their politicians.
So Steve, I think that you're correct, and I want to cite this in history. It's very important. The Tea Party that we now know as Tea Party was provoked at anger at the Troubled Asset Relief Program, the TARP. What was TARP? What became $1 trillion, right? Billions we thought. It ultimately ended up being over $1 trillion going into Wall Street banks and big major mega corporations because of the financial meltdown. Some of us will say the contradictions of capitalism and Wall Street. I got you, Eric. Let me finish the sentence and I'll... So that's how it erupted.
Well, just very quickly, for a small example, I was involved in a movement to make the subways free in New York. And we had a massive demonstration. Everybody jumped over the turnstiles. Now, and there was a day or two where we got headlines and so forth and so on. What we didn't do, we had a few politicians with us, but we had no politicians who were willing to go up against the banks. And the banks are actually the people who created the subway system.
There's a whole story there.
Well, I know that story.
Yeah.
I don't want to go into this anyway. But the thing was that we didn't have that, we didn't put that together enough, and none of the politicians would have done it anyway, except Paul and Dwyer. And so we couldn't go past a certain level.
So here's the thing. I want to get back to the Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street, because I think that there is something very valuable here. Because if you think about if one thinks about, and flip chart, easel, looking for a dry erase that's a different color, don't have it, so I'll just use this. I'm going to actually now use a Venn diagram to think about. This will be the Tea Party. And of course we know how Venn diagrams are circles, right? So the Tea Party erupted and they were angry at government, or as we say where I'm from, government, right? Government. Specifically government money and government tax dollars, because they arose out of anger at the Troubled Asset Relief Program. It's really important to recognize who developed the Troubled Asset Relief Program.
Obama.
It's a trick question.
No,
Wall Street.
Wall Street.
Exactly. Remember when the 2008 eruption happened, Obama was the president-elect.
That's right.
Bush was still in the White House, but only for a short amount of time.
Right.
Obama and Bush got together with Terry Geithner, with folks from Wall Street, and they jointly devised the plan. Some of us believe that if Obama had actually just said, this is a reset moment, and we're going to invest $1 billion in a New Deal, and we're going to actually rebuild roads and bridges. Hello, Minnesota, right? Remember the bridge, right? And just gone in for a massive investment, we would have had a whole different thing. Instead, they jointly agreed to a Troubled Asset Relief Program that took what became $1 trillion into banks and Wall Street. And of course, what did Wall Street do? Immediately gave themselves bonuses for the great job that they had just done, right? I mean, it was insane. I was at the county courthouse in Humboldt County, California. They were not white ring nationalists. They were not. They were ordinary people, many of whom did come out of a sort of a populist mentality, Scott. But they were like for 4 to 6 weeks, they were just ordinary people out there. You know, stop the Wall Street sellout. And last time I checked, anger at Wall Street was supposed to be the left's issue. Right. That was supposed to be us, right? You can thank Bill Clinton and the neoliberals and the Democratic Leadership Council for stealing that away and getting on a road to neoliberalism, right? All I'm getting at is it was 4 to 6 weeks later that the Koch billionaire money showed up. Nature abhors a vacuum, as does politics. And I argue that if we on the left had seized that moment and had not been fawning over we finally elected a black president, if we were actually willing to say, instead of just what color skin the president has, what you just did, if we had actually gone in, what became the Tea Party would have been a populist uprising that would have actually looked like what became as the next circle, which is Occupy. And for this circle, what was Occupy angry about? Well, it's in its name.
1%.
Wall Street.
Yeah.
right? And like every Venn diagram, there is a sweet spot of intersection where a very powerful truth is actually told visually. And that is, the Tea Party represents a group of people who are angry about government, specifically government spending, that government spending is happening in such a way that it only benefits Wall Street, and Wall Street is using a small amount of that money to go back and influence government. I submit this. If you take out the small minority of the Tea Party who are in fact racist, homophobic, horrible people, and they do exist, but in my lived experience, they're actually a minority. They're a vocal minority, but they are actually a minority. Most of the people who self-identify more or less with the Tea Party movement are not xenophobes and racist white nationalists. They are really angry, though, about the shift that they're seeing happen. And if you take out of the Occupy Wall Street movement the small but very vocal number of burn it down crowd, right? Again, a minority in the Occupy Wall Street movement, but very vocal. But if you take out the most loud elements of both Occupy Wall Street and the Tea Party, you begin to actually see something magical happen, where somehow people who seem to be ideologically on the left, ideologically on the right, actually finding, dare I say it,
common ground.
Common ground. Yes?
Can I, there's another point like exactly like that. At least I think I saw it. Ron Paul's campaign at the height of the Iraq War and all that, where the left was saying, don't do this, etc., etc., and we kind of needed somebody more on the right spectrum.
The anti-war, anti-imperialist element of the libertarian movement are people I work with all the time.
Further to the left than most Democrats.
Scott, right? I mean, you and I both know it as peaceniks who have actually worked on that issue. So elections is a front of struggle. What I'm getting at is there is a way to engage elections authentically and still actually engage them. But it brings us up against, but in order to win, what can you do? And this brings us to our kinetic exercise. And this is actually for real. I want you to, it's a super complex thing. I'm gonna reduce it to a binary so that we can do an exercise where we're literally gonna line up depending on where you think you fall in answer to this question. Here is, if you believe you engage in elections only to introduce ideas, like that, the only reason that you would do it, you don't even care about how many votes you get. 0 votes at all. It's just because you were using it to introduce a concept, you would be all the way up against this wall. I will say almost never does somebody literally go all the way up against a wall in an exercise like this, because things are more complex than that. Because on this side of the room would be that you do anything you can to get to 50% plus 1. Lie, cheat, and steal, it doesn't matter, because once you get elected, then you can actually do good things. So the ends justify the means, do whatever it takes to actually get there. And here's a hint, please nobody be up against the wall. Right? But let's be clear, is it important to win an election?
Yeah.
So here's what we're getting at. I want you to, and if you think we should not even bother with elections, then you can just stay off to the side of this, and then I wonder, why the hell did you choose this workshop? So I would suspect everybody ought to be somewhere on here. And again, there's not a right or a wrong place to be. And in the very middle is, I literally can't make any decision. But I'm going to ask you to just self-organize yourself along this axis. Where would you fall? Only to introduce ideas, absolutely must win elections. All right, so we're seeing this. It's somewhere, like the middle is, nobody is, oh, thank you. There they are. All right, so Nils is up. And
you people are in the middle of the middle.
Nina and Nils are like, I noticed that they both literally said, well, where is the middle? And Nils is, so, okay, this is very good. So it's interesting, right? And so Eric is leaning a little bit more over. That's cool. The puppy is not sure. It's really interesting. So what I also noticed is, so a couple of you sort of figured out about a quarter way and literally lined up, right? I think that Niels and Nina kind of did the same thing, and we've got others that are leaning this way. So what are we going to do? Eric, you're an outlier, my friend. Talk to me. Why are you over there?
Because this is a process, right? So I think when you begin the process, you should be thinking about the ideas and what you really want to put across. The one part of what I'm skeptical is that we've seen a lot of politicians win, and then it doesn't quite, they have a lot of trouble, or they get corrupted in some ways, or they so forth and so on. The irony is that I believe what actually McCain said the other day, which is, if you're going to go into it, it's going to be a compromise. It never is going to turn out the way you expect it to turn out. You're not going to win 100%. But if you're going to go into elections, you have to be able to negotiate, and you're going to get some of your positions and not. And I think that's worthwhile. I don't think, though, that Vince Lombardi said that winning is everything. I think it can be really corrupting that particular.
So you are leaning like.
So at the beginning, I think you start with ideas.
Got it. No, that's interesting. So let me come over here. You're on the far side of the 50% plus one, Scott.
I'm so sick of symbolic campaigns, and the left does a hell of a lot of them. So that's why I went a little more this way.
I noticed, because it was interesting. You were first lined up, and when I made the point of people lining up, you literally scooted over and said, well, you know what? I'm actually going to come a little bit over, so that's why I wanted to.
And that's why, because I do not want to work on any more symbolic campaigns. I want to win elections.
I'm in it to win it. I want to be very clear. I am, I believe in electoral politics, but I am in it to win it.
But Bernie Sanders, do you think that's a symbolic campaign?
Not at all. We were heavy supporters. Yeah, but we put up a hell of a good fight, and it wasn't symbolic.
So, I mean, look, again, there's no right or wrong answers to this.
Symbolic means you can't win.
But he couldn't even get the nomination. I mean, I don't know.
So again, we're not going to do a back and forth here.
Anyway.
I mean, and you know, I am going to actually point out that Zevin actually did, in fact, go up and refuse to participate. So what's that about, Zevin?
I believe that electoral campaigns or elections is actually playing in the enemy's playing field. They hold all the cards, or most of them, when it comes to funding, party apparatus, organization. But the reason I'm here is I believe you can use election cycles as a vehicle to create positive social change. So my example would be, say in 2018, we use something like a brand new Congress. I don't know much about it, but I kept hearing it today, and advocating basically a clean sweep of Congress. What I would advocate, number one, is to have a law or constitutional amendment where we require one male, one female to represent all 435 districts. So automatically you're doubling the members of Congress. And then use transition as a way to relocalize so that we're able to sustain a long-term national general strike that can start in November during the general elections. And instead of participating in the system, you withdraw from it through political non-cooperation, economic non-cooperation, social non-cooperation, for as long as it takes for the government to give in to our demands, whatever they might be, because that's our power to unplug the system, because we have that power and we have the numbers. But I'm for using electoral cycles as a vehicle to do radical actions.
So Nina and Nils, you were literally you got in the center and then just nudged a little bit. So I'm going to ask each of you.
So for me, the way you described that end, it seemed to me that the spectrum began from zero, you don't do anything out of integrity, and then you kind of edge towards out of integrity. So I am not willing to do anything out of integrity, but get as close to winning as possible. But that's what I interpreted from how you said it.
No, that's and your interpretation, right? I mean, I tried to be very careful with the language, but I'll just observe, for Nina anyway, the concept of integrity was critical. Like, did you hear her? I will not do anything out of integrity, but I'm going to get as close as I can to winning. So without crossing the line. So I just think that's a very powerful and honorable way to describe. It's not how I was trying to set it up, but the fact that you heard it that way and you said, I'm going to go right there, but not cross it. No.
Nina did the same thing. Like Martin Luther King, the ends are inherent in the means. It's the means are a seed.
So when I hear somebody say the ends justify the means, that is not true. That the means are the ends in the making. So if you want to live in a peaceful world, we have to engage in peaceful tactics for it. You don't beat your way into a peaceful dynamic or a relationship with somebody. So I really appreciate how both of you did it, and everybody for doing it. So everybody can sit down. The reason that we do that, by the way, is as a popular educator, this is just another quick little thing. We know that that there are different types of learners, and in our society, kinetic learners who actually learn better by moving around never, ever, or rarely ever get this opportunity. So that whole point was an effort to give kinetic learners a chance to actually participate. The other thing I'm doing is passing it around. Now normally, this is just the right crowd that I'm doing this, and I'm actually personally passing it out. And the reason I'm doing this is actually because, and I'm just naming it, it's giving me a chance to try, for those who want to, for me to actually be able to make eye contact with each other. And not because it's some sort of smarmy, Carnegie, make friends and influence people. I'm not going to sell you Amway. But as a facilitator myself, and for others of you, when the room is small enough, it really does help to be able to do that, because that human connection of actually making eye contact with somebody is a very powerful way. We're primates. And just like looking at each other's eyes and just holding it for just a moment actually creates a bit of a heart connection in that particular moment. So I say that out loud because as a facilitator, one of the things, bless you, that is really important is to make that. And you'll notice also as through the entire session, I've been constantly scanning, right? Because as I'm scanning, I'm just seeing if anybody wants to raise their hands, right? But the other thing is, I'm not just doing it up there. I'm trying to actually make contact with people in order to actually build that. So what you have in your hands comes out of Resolutions Northwest. It's sometimes known as the Social Barometer. It's also sometimes called a Spectrum of Allies. And a Spectrum of Allies basically goes like this. These are people who absolutely, positively, 100% already agree with you. These are the people who absolutely, positively oppose everything that you want. These people are literally right in the middle and leans against. And I'm using a little simpler language than is on your chart, leans towards. What's particularly interested in for those of you who do elections, you know about 1 through 5 in elections? Anybody know the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in an election? Lee, what's that about?
Yeah, it was one who is like strongly with you and will be active, and then 2 would be, or they are kind of like agree with you, but are kind of like busy with other things. Whereas 3, I'm guessing 3 would be neutral, 4 would be just like not interested, don't want to talk about it, and 5 like organized, active opponents.
Correct. And so in elections, typically, for those of you who have done elections, especially local elections, they live or breathe actually in door knocking campaigns. Actually having a conversation with somebody at their door to actually ask them for the vote. How many of you have done door knocking? Oh good, a lot of hands go up. And how many of you actually captured the data to find out if this person is a 1 through 5? Fewer hands come up. So, and I point this out, not to shame anybody, not to be, but so the fact that there were so many door knockers is awesome, because most people don't even do that. But to get good at it, you have to capture the data of the 1s and 2s, because that's called voter ID. The second step is the GOTV. What does that stand for?
Get out the vote.
How do you know to get out the vote if you don't know who you're actually trying to get out? Get out the vote is not just driving around honking your horn and waving, your sign. Get out the vote would actually be, Nina said that she was actually going to vote for me. My campaign is like calling Nina to make sure, so it's election day, have you voted, do you need a ride to the polls, etc., etc. So that's the simplistic notion of it. So I did it like this so that you could understand in the election context 1 through 5. Here's the thing. When you identify in transition work, I would say this. Like when you find somebody who already completely agrees with you, what's the best thing to do with that person? Popcorn it. Anybody?
Try to recruit them to be more active.
There you go.
Yeah.
Say it louder.
Recruit them to be more active in the campaign.
Exactly. Do stuff with them. Like, oh my God. Nina's like, got a live wire. Nils is like totally on board. He loved what he was at. And he's like, Nils, here are all the different things that we're doing. Here's the menu of options. What do you want to do? Get involved. Like, let's start rolling together, right?
Yeah.
2 is somebody who is like, I really like what you're saying here. That makes a lot of sense. What do you do with the 2?
Fine with anything they'll do.
Exactly. You're both right? Like you offer them a menu of options, anything that they'll want to do. Give them more information. Like, in other words, that person, the 2, is the leaning your way, but is not already the way Niels was, is like, oh my God, I've been waiting to find out about you. I'm ready to start rolling up my sleeves and getting to work. Polling data is pretty clear that the beauty about transition, almost everybody is here. Right? If you get out of the ideology of it and you just get down to the substance, most people are here. The middle are the people who literally don't care. Right? 4s are the ones who lean against, and if you look at it, and then 5 are the people who absolutely oppose you. And then on the paper that you've got, I want you to notice that there are on the 180-degree arc on the inside of that perimeter. You have, they called them leading activists, leading opponents, active allies, active opponents. So the inside perimeter is describing where they are on our graph and arc, right? The outside is how you should think about engaging with them. And so actively in support and nurture the 1s, identify and contact, increase cohesion, roughly the 2s. Number 3, you try to win them over, inform them, build relationships. But here's the other thing I want to be really clear. The neuroscience is actually now, like, it's conclusive. The 5s, do you know what you should do with the 5s?
Walk away.
Get away.
Get away.
Run.
So here's the thing. How many people here already know with confidence that if you talk to a Tea Party person, you're going to end up yelling at them, maybe even cursing at them? They're all a bunch of racists, and you know that. If you're willing to admit that you're such a, like, screw the Tea Party, is there anybody in this crowd that would say that? Well, this is the first time. Okay. There you go. So here's the thing. Thank you for admitting it. And I'll just say this. Anybody who believes that, please never talk to a Tea Party person again. You make my life and my job much more difficult. If you ever find yourself engaged in that kind of conversation, you need to end it immediately. In terms of effective communication, it does not work, right? It cannot work. It will not work. So the notion of who you're talking to is important. And you know what else the neuroscience shows? Not only will you never, ever convince somebody who is a true 5 to your worldview, you know what actually you're likely to do?
Strengthen it.
More strident.
More strident. Strengthen their position. Including, by the way, if you give them objective, factual data that actually proves that they're wrong, not only now have you increased their conviction, but now anything you say is suspect. You have literally now made it impossible to even have reasonable dialogue and communication with them. So the more you try to pile on with just objective data for somebody who has a different worldview, it cannot work. Zevin, very quickly, we're running out of time. Right?
I had the same experience in Occupy Wall Street. We had Ron Paul libertarians and Tea Parties there. And my approach was, first, what are you guys doing here? And that's when I learned that overlap on the Venn diagram, that we had common ground. And number 2, instead of trying to argue with them and change their opinion, I approach them as an anthropologist seeking to understand their position. And once I did that, all I was doing is asking questions, peeling down that layer to get mutual understanding. And once you do that, they open up to you. They're more than willing to talk to you about their philosophy, their ideology, and sooner or later, you'll find something that you have in common with them.
You know, it's so interesting because, and this is with a hat tip to Linda, okay, the session where we were at when we first met yesterday, her name was Linda.
Tina?
Tina.
Tina Clark?
Tina Clark. So I asked her permission because she had a beautiful 4 steps to dialogue that I wanted to use.
I was in there.
Oh, wasn't that beautiful? I mean, she was so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. You were there too. Number 1, ask questions. Number 2, observe and state where you are finding common ground. 3 step is to raise any concern you have. Now, the other thing that she was very clear about is if there's somebody that you really agree with, you have to spend almost 80 to 90% of everything you do just asking questions. When you finally find a bit of common ground, she urges, do not use that as, aha, this is my final moment to say this is where we agree, and pivot to, here's why your logic fails. Aha, I got you. Score a point. That's not how dialogue works. It's not how persuasion works, right? At the end of the day, what she says is, the data actually shows, and I'll just repeat her, I don't know that it's true, but she seemed like an honest person. But the data shows that you have to actually do this probably, up to multiple times, like up to 9 times before the guard is let down. And then you don't pivot to proving that they're wrong. You literally raise the concern that you have around, okay, I think that we've got some agreement here, but it seems to me that if climate crisis is actually real, then we've got a real problem. And then, so the whole point I'm getting at here is that at the end of the day, you can't actually persuade. What you might be able to do, is try to actually, over time, begin to ask them to challenge and question their fundamental underlying assumptions. Right. But here's the point that I'm going to make, friends. Where I'm from, we'd call that very high-hanging fruit. The amount of time that it requires to actually do that, I don't think it makes sense. There is so much low-hanging fruit, especially in the transition movement. What does that good Southern metaphor mean to you non-Southerners when I talk about it as high-hanging fruit and low-hanging fruit?
Energy invested on energy return.
There you go. Exactly. Good engineering, right? I mean, like, and in the world of permaculture, I want to encourage us, think about elections as a stacking function. What's a stacking function in permaculture?
Feeding 2 birds with 1 seed.
Boom, hit it. What if you actually were introducing ideas and trying to actually win so that you can make backyard chickens actually, something that is facilitated? What if you're actually always true to your principles, values, and integrity, and you're consciously always looking to say, how are we going to advance the general plan? How are we going to recreate the Beacon Food Forest? If you don't know the Beacon Food Forest, put it down as a bit of homework for yourself. Seattle, Washington, actually creating an urban food forest, including vegetable gardens and fruits, vegetables, and nuts in a community park. That's sort of the big picture thing. And we could actually expand over and over what other of those things can do. Yes,
I
Nina?
just want to add, Boston is similar, doing a local food forest. BostonLocalFoodForest.org is another similar,
Thank you.
And Minneapolis.
Yeah, so this is the amazing thing. These things are bubbling up, y'all. They're beginning to happen. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is a genuine appeal to those, because I mean, like, y'all self-selected to come here. I think that the insistence on some part of transition that eschew politics or policy as if it is just, anathema or it's heresy. I understand that they don't want to get involved in
dirty politics.
Yeah, exactly. They don't want to get dirty and so forth. But at the end of the day, I think that either-or proposition is just wrong. I don't know how we're going to be able, at the best transition can ever be, if we don't engage public policy and government, is little niche, wonderful, eco-groovy stuff, and climate crisis will continue, and the world will burn. And fascism will literally assert itself in this country. We've got to engage in electoral politics. And as I tell many of my friends who are anarchists who call me a sellout because I engage in politics, and they're like, we don't believe in the state, man. To which I say, you may not believe in the state, but the state believes in you. And that's actually where the policies are being made. The last little trick I want to give folks is a question around framing. This is again out of the cutting edge neuroscience, especially for those of you who like to research things or know more about it. It's George Lakoff and his work at UC Berkeley. And framing is not just good language or good branding. It is understanding that all of us operate in the world of frames. I have a frame, you have a frame, you know, George Bush has a frame, you know, everybody has a frame of how they see the world. So if Steve and I share a frame, it makes it very easy for us to communicate and talk. And Nils, I'm going to use you as an example. So if Nils is trying to talk to me and like sort of point out something and I've got this frame, Nils can like try to get really loud and maybe somehow, oh, you went too quick, that's right. But you're beautiful, I love it. The point is this. So Nils might try to like talk loud or something and somehow get me to expand myself so out of my periphery. Like that's a hard task, but notice it's only up to me, right? The second thing he can do is somehow get me to literally shift my frame into his frame, right? Super hard to do, right? I almost never do it. But Nils has already, Nils, what is the right way to actually communicate with me and my frame? Is like, oh, hello, Nils. All right, so what is the point that you're making? Here's the thing. What we know, again, from neuroscience is, like, on the left and the right, people have different worldviews, different deep convictions, and there are different things that motivate them. No, like, it's not that the left are puppies and sunshine and the right want to stomp on those puppies, right? That's not it. They are motivated by different things. And on the right, typically words like duty and loyalty and sanctity and authority, you know, these are the fairness, like these are the things that actually matter to them. And so if we're going to communicate with anybody who leans in this direction, try to do your best to get into their frame, find that sort of commonality around them, and make some level of community around their existing frames. Because even if you're not able to completely win them over to your side, you will be able, at least for them, to recognize the humanity that you share with one another. I'm so sorry. I mean, it's only an hour. I tried to give you as much as I can. I'm going to conclude with a quick go around, and I always start to the left to just say, Nils, is there anything that you wish we had talked about or anything that was really good or both? And everybody can feel free to pass. So this is a bit of both evaluation and opportunity for a short closing final thought.
Democracy Convention.
Oh my gosh! Well, thank you. I should be. Please, Nils and I will both be at the Democracy Convention. So take one and pass it. It is here, especially for those of you in the Twin Cities. Next week, starting Wednesday night, is the opening session. You can take as many as you want. I've got more. And I'll come to the open session tomorrow, or later on at 2 o'clock, and sort of make this pitch as well. It is a convention where we bring together peace activists, media activists, racial justice activists, different sectors of society, economics, and say a convention around the idea of power and democracy. Nils will be doing a session literally on transition.
And political revolution.
And political revolution. So this session only with 90 minutes instead of just 60. Thank you, Nils. Juliet.
Just from a practical point of view, next step, how do you do that? How do you support people?
All right, so what I would say is...
Part of it.
But very quickly, the answer is local elections, building alliances that bring together Greens, Reds, Bernie-crats, Progressive Democrats. The model is the Richmond Progressive Alliance or the North Coast People's Alliance. I actually think that there is a path to victory. It will not be just the Green Party. It will not be just the Democratic Party. It will not be just the Socialist Party. It will be a true united front. And like the Richmond Progressive Alliance or the North Coast People's Alliance are examples.
I love you, brother. I got to go set up for
Yeah. All right. See you then.
Oh, Nils.
Scott. Please go.
And the dog?
And the puppy will always go where Nils go. I've seen that.
I would have loved some role playing. I have 4 younger brothers, and 2 of them are Trump supporters. And one of them I can talk to, the other one we just don't talk anymore because we yell bullshit at each
I
other.
thought about doing a role play instead of the kinetic exercise in only an hour, but thanks for that. Lee?
Yeah, what I was wondering about is it's the coalition building stuff you're talking about. That really is interesting, but how do you do that within the straitjacket of it's a total winner take all electoral system? And
check out the Richmond Progressive Alliance or the North Coast People's Alliance. Richmond Progressive Alliance or North Coast People's Alliance. I'm involved in both of them.
Richmond, California?
Yes. Forrest?
I think for me, working at the local level, it would be useful to learn about the differences at the local level, because I do feel like local elections are different than big national movements, and they have a different set of values and players involved. So focusing a little bit more on local instead of just elections in general would be useful.
Yeah. If you address the problems that the nonprofit status brings to people willing to get into the election process.
Yeah, I'll just say very quickly, the nonprofit industrial complex is a function not of the genetic defects of the United States. We're the only country that have it, and it's because of IRS laws. It's almost as if the ruling elite have intentionally defanged and depoliticized social movements.
No.
How about that? Kathy?
I don't have anything to add. I just wanted to say thank you.
Despite how I'm dressed, I just happen to be black, dressed in black, so I'm not an anarchist and I'm not for burning the system down. But what wasn't addressed is how a lot of us, like myself, see that the political electoral system is rigged, bought for, and owned by the power elite. So aren't we wasting our efforts in such a rigged game, especially when campaigns like Bernie Sanders prove it, and so many others?
Steve?
I'm largely going to pass, but I do want to say that I think this was a very good, high-energy session, and I really appreciate that. Thank you. Good focus.
I appreciate getting these techniques, but I also know I'm up against, you mentioned neuroscience, we talked briefly about Edward Bernays. The people that are trying to, say, reinforce a particular view are very smart and very good at what they do. They'll look at national demographics down to the county. They will raise an issue there, not because they care about gay rights, but because they know that's what will drive people to the polls. And sometimes I feel a little ill-equipped to combat that level of sophistication and resources.
Guns, God, and gays are the 3 G's of how the ruling elite are really trying to use to keep us divided around where there's so much agreement. And all I would say, John, is that the more work that you do in learning the tools to be a guerrilla culture worker, the better you'll be at it. Say.
Now my problem is when you are moving from that idea to the not going to the extreme right, and you are staying little off the center, you make some promises to the electorates who are electing you and all that. How do you are stuck in a system where you are not able to do anything.
What I would say is this: I always think about elections as a front of struggle. I actually never say like it's all about just winning the election. I literally think about elections as a barometer. How well organized are we? How well have we actually convinced people? Because I always, like, the way I talk about being a revolutionary is how I always talk, including in elections. So what I'm doing is using it as a chance to see, did I get 1%, 5%, 10%? How far and how deep are we? Ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm in it to win it. I expect to be able to win a peaceful revolution in my lifetime. Nina.
Great session. Thank you so much. I really appreciated the nuanced review of Occupy, as I was down there, and it was really frustrating to later be seen as like a bunch of anarchists who are clueless, like hippies, which was not the case in my perspective at all, or fully. And then in terms of nonprofits and political activity, they're not allowed to endorse specific candidates, but there is actually a wide spectrum of political activity nonprofits are allowed to do, and there's a bunch of webinars and trainings online and information that people can find out and really get involved and actually leverage that power.
Thank you. Very important.
I am aware of the book called Steel Town or whatever, put out by the Richmond Progressive Alliance. We had that speaker here in town.
Steve Early, good friend.
But I'm not aware of the North Coast People's Alliance, where that is.
Humboldt County, California. We are literally just starting up, and it is another. We are inspired by the Richmond Progressive Alliance and are trying to replicate the model. I think that that's the sweet spot. Rosa.
Thank you. Great session. Lots of information crammed in. I'll add to your wheelhouse the Tea Party and environmentalists in Florida joined a very weird but effective coalition
Debbie Dooley.
to defeat $26 million of corporate misinformation to pass an amendment to allow solar.
Woo!
I'll always applaud that.
That's a Tea Party I could talk to.
I'll pass because people have already said one.
Okay. Thanks so much. Again, we only had 1 hour. It was very rich. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.